Okay. Today we'll be talking about the author's craft throughout the book Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close. To begin, what I found throughout the book was the building of character structure with the author, which the author did really well. And my example is how 4 shows powerful character structure during most of the book. Thomas, which is Oscar's grandfather, not his actual father, he's only introduced physically to the reader throughout the book, throughout most of the beginning of the book, and then at a point in the book, he dedicates a whole entire chapter to Thomas, and the chapter is dedicated to Junior Thomas, which is Thomas's son, who he's never with. And I think that it's really powerful because of the fact that, considering the lack of character development, he makes up for it all at one time. And then the other thing that I noticed was, he likes to fool the author throughout the book, which is talking about how, in my example was in page 254 towards the bottom. It reads about how Oscar fools the reader into thinking that he did one thing. In reality, he does the other. Throughout the book, he does it several times. Whenever his psychiatrist or whoever he's talking to, psychologist, I guess you would say, talks about, he asks him if he thinks that anything good could come from his father's death, and Oscar makes the reader believe that he's saying something when in reality he doesn't. And then at the bottom, he goes back to reality, which I thought was really cool and interesting.
Okay. Throughout the book, he organizes the book by the chapters, obviously, but throughout the chapters, he names them as, for example, my feelings. He uses that title not only for one chapter, but he uses it for 4 pages, 75, 174, 224, and 306. Throughout the chapters, he also, even though he names them the same, he uses different dates to show us where the flashbacks are at. And another thing he did throughout the book was showing the reader what he's doing. So he wants to make it clear what he's talking about, and he wants to show his readers what he's doing as to physically showing it, not just saying it. For example, in page 269 to 271, his way of language changes from letters to actual numbers, and he actually writes the book like that. And another example of that would be how he tried to write names of colors with a different color, and he actually shows us that throughout page 45 to 49.
I discussed about imagery, and I think that 4 uses imagery to be able to put us in the character's shoes. It is a big contribution to the book throughout the whole story. Without imagery, you would basically be lost, and it sets up. It is set up to be able to see where everybody's doing or their setting. An example would be when Oscar goes to go see the old man for the first time, Mr. Black. He is surprised by how the apartment is so similar to his. It says, "I was in the guest room watching television." Okay. Huge column right in the middle of the dining room, big as 2 refrigerators, made it possible to fit a table. Also, it discusses when the grandma was in the setting of when the dad died. It says that I was in the guest room watching the television, knitting you a scarf, news was on, time was passing like a hand waiting for the train. And that explains how the grandma felt during that situation, where she was watching everything that was going on in the news about the Twin Towers falling, but not knowing that her son was in them. Also, when Oscar first meets his grandpa, the renter, he describes exactly how he looks by saying, incredibly old, white short sleeve, elbows hairy, and has a gap between his two front teeth. Oscar said he has a gap in his two front teeth because he wants to, like, I guess, foreshadow that it's his grandpa without directly saying it. And I also did perspective change, which is a huge thing in this book because it's kind of like confusing at the beginning because you hear half of one story at first and then you hear the other half when you find out the details of what the other person has to say. Like, when Oscar first went to the art store and saw his dad's name, he was like, "That's my dad, Thomas Schultz. What a coincidence." He thought that his dad had gone to the art store and that it was related to the key, but later on you find out, I wrote my name with each piece of art I found, which was a grandpa. So you find out that Thomas Schultz and the grandpa have the same name, and it was a grandpa, not the dad. And also you get to see what Oscar was thinking, and then the reason why the grandmas did what she did at the performance where he performed Hamlet. The next performance was Only Grandma again. She cried at all the wrong times and cracked up at all the wrong times. And then later on, you hear the grandma's perspective. Oscar, I'm remembering you on stage in front of all those strangers. I just wanted to say to them, he's mine.
One of the things that I noticed throughout the book was that there was a lot of illustrations, and I think that adds more emotion, throughout. Because, for example, on page 53, you see these keys, and then like a bunch of pictures start coming up throughout the next 20 pages, I think, and we just agreed that it adds motion and it helps you picture what's happening a little more.
He does a lot of visualization throughout the book.
And I did that. He has a lot of syntax throughout the book. Like, he has a lot of shortcut sentences, and we think that the short sentences, the short declarative sentences, he makes them short because he wants to create more tension and emotion. For example, on page 111, he keeps repeating, he makes sentences that's something from nothing. This is something. We decided this is nothing, something, something, nothing, something, nothing, nothing, nothing. And that kind of the sentences are really short, and I guess that kind of it does add more tension when you're reading. And on page 34, he also does that again because he just keeps putting help, I'm sorry, and all this other stuff. And we also notice that he has a lot of repetition throughout the book, and the strongest place when I saw this was on page 230, where he keeps repeating, planes going into buildings, bodies falling, people waving shirts out of high windows, planes going into buildings, bodies falling, planes going into buildings, people covered in gray dust, bodies falling, buildings falling. So we think that kind of adds, more emotion, because he's kind of explaining what's going on when the attacks happen, and it just kind of helps you picture it more. When he says planes going into buildings, I guess you could actually picture a plane going into the building, and bodies falling, you could picture all the bodies falling.
And yeah, that's the conclusion to our author's craft thing. Thank you.